His discourse today is entitled, "The Thing We Are Fighting Against."
You were the first person to text me when I went to the hospital. You were also the first girl I fell for. You asked me why I'd gotten pulled out of math class and sent to the social worker. You asked me if I was okay and that you wanted to know what was going on. You probably are too elite and important now to ever see this. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I hope you don't go back to our hometown. I never let anyone know I started feeling sad. Our phone conversations would hold me together sometimes, even if it was just math homework. The two of us both hiding in our own homes, we'd go on and on together. I never wanted those talks to end, but they would, and I'd be alone in my room again. It was Christmas when I stopped talking to my boyfriend and everyone else about stuff. Even you didn't know what had been happening. I quietly retreated and decided to deal with it myself. I was about 5 months away from 15 when I first cut myself. I used an orange X-Acto box cutter. You probably saw it while we were in class once. It was a box cutter that would extend, and then when one was dull, you could easily snap it off. I used it to make paper sculptures in my mixed media class. I was really good with fine details when I used it. One of my final projects was this wild-looking architecture sculpture. The base of the sculpture was painted red and blue, like water during a sunset. I carefully cut another piece of paper so when it was squished, the cuts would separate and protrude and concave. I painted this piece completely black. Fire-like colors would come out of the pockets. My art teacher said it looked like a hotel on fire. She commended me for how clean-cut my curves were. At the same time, I'd make long cuts on my thighs and smaller, deeper cuts on my biceps. It wouldn't be another 2 months till I put little gashes in my wrists over and over again. You saw those cuts one day, the day after the hospital, actually. I had to explain myself to you the night before. Once I got home from the ER, you were the first person I responded to. I poured out my heart and told you everything that I usually cover up. But the next day, I had to face you in our math class. You looked at my long sleeves in mid-May and quietly nodded. Later that week, you asked to borrow my dumb fishnet wristbands to impress some older boy. I told you I couldn't take them off, and you cocked your head. Then you nodded and turned to write down the homework questions. You started to get popular just about the time I thought I was a different kind of sick. I was one of those girls who liked boys and girls. I couldn't find many examples of boys, but girls I could definitely. You were most certainly one of them. I remember when I told myself I wanted to be honest with my family. 1 week later, I told them. For the next week, my dad cried, and my mother wouldn't look at me. I didn't know what to do. I would have told you all about it if you had ever picked up the phone. You didn't have to care about me, I just missed your voice. I didn't want you to leave me in the dark, too. I know you're busy now. I don't know what we would talk about now. If you ever see this, please don't tell me.
His discourse today is entitled, "Trust in God's Plan."
I'm not sure if you would want to hear this, and I'm certain you'll never see it. You'll probably hear about how your daughter wrote sad love letters to women you didn't know she loved, how I lived in your house while I carried on with all these terrible things. One thing I am certain you don't know is what was happening at Easter Mass that spring of that year I was acting moody. For the first time, I made the decision to kill myself. You were 2 seats away from me. The year leading up to it was foggy, but the moment is very clear. It was midnight Easter Mass. It was one of those Catholic churches from the 70s that was built to look more modern and accepting, but it was still made of brown brick and had no AC. At the beginning of the Mass, all the lights were out because Jesus is still dead on the Saturday before Easter. I don't think I'd eaten in the last 2 days, and my tights were rubbing against the cuts on my legs. I was sweating since I couldn't take off my sweatshirt. The sweater was also rubbing on my other cuts. My sweater was from a discount department store, and it was fairly soft, but was still too tough for open cuts. The congregation slowly passed lit candles upwards from the back of the church. I couldn't really hold myself up comfortably, and then it was my turn to hold a lit candle. If I fainted, everyone would find out. If I took off my sweater, everyone would find out. All at once, the lights blasted on and the choir screeched all together. Everyone around me blew out their candles. As we all sat, I decided I would not continue like this. It was one of my first real adult decisions. After I came home from the hospital, you took my siblings to our grandmother's house. You didn't want me to be a bad influence on them. I don't think they know, even now, what happened that day. We sat in silence as we drove back home in the empty minivan. We ate McDonald's at the kitchen table, also in silence. When we finished, you told me to give you the knife I'd used to cut myself. The orange one I used for class. Once I handed it over, you told me to give you my favorite sweatshirt. It was the one I would hide my arms in. With my orange knife, you cut up my sweatshirt in front of me and handed the knife and scraps back to me. You took me outside and had me throw both of them in the garbage. I stared down at the only coping skill I had. I still don't wear pullover sweatshirts without feeling constrained. A year later, I would be normal again because of Saturday therapy sessions that no one dared to talk about. We wouldn't talk about what happened the year before. I was designing costumes and seemingly had a new friend who I worked with, and I seemed happy. A year later, I would sit you down and tell you I liked girls and boys. For a week, you wouldn't talk to me or even look at me in the eye at dinner. You would yell at me about how I can't like girls and that I didn't know what I was talking about. You would also tell me that I cut myself because I thought I was like those people. You talked to my therapist in private about my acting out, and then you started talking to me again. I begged my therapist to tell me if you hated me, but she said it was confidential. We never spoke about girls or boys ever again. 4 years later, I would move out of your house officially. I would have told you that I only liked girls by then. I'd call you to ask about some moving logistics, and it would become the last time we really spoke. You would tell me I was turning your family against you, and that your life was better off without me. Then you would hang up. You'd be forced to call back to half-heartedly apologize. So, I'm certain you'll never see this.
His discourse today is entitled Spectators and Actors.
You came into my life after I was locked back up in the gay, mentally unstable closet. I told my parents I was cured and no longer needed therapy. You were the only person I willingly told all that stuff to. I don't know what you're doing now, but you became the center of my world until I was 18. We worked together, had lunch period, and any other moments we could see each other. We'd meet in the hallways just to make goo-goo eyes at each other. I remember one time you had your hands around my waist in the hall outside an empty classroom. I saw my brother turn a corner and I threw you into the dark room. I don't think my brother even noticed you. I think you were pissed for a second and then realized how pale-faced I'd become. We didn't talk about it. When I brought my little sister to theater rehearsals, you'd play with her and I got to feel normal. We'd act like we would and my sister wouldn't understand what was happening anyway. All my sister knew was that you were fun to be around and liked to play jokes on me. When it was just the two of us, I told you little parts of the car crash that was the year before you came into my life. We'd sit cross-legged on the floor of the costume room, painting dance shoes together. I remember one day in our senior year specifically, I was painting dance shoes blue and covering them in glitter. You went on and on about things, and I sat, silently painting. I didn't tell you about the dream I was still having. I didn't know how. I'd have this dream where my teeth, bloody and broken, would fall into my hands while I stood unable to do anything. It happened the same way I imagined my teeth would shatter if I stuck a gun barrel between my teeth. But I didn't tell you any of that. You used to tell everyone that we were dating, but you would still ask me for advice about boys. One day after rehearsal, where you had been sitting on my lap, you asked me to meet your new boyfriend. He was coming to pick you up to drive you home. Later that year, you'd get mad at me for talking to another girl from another school. You'd be upset again when I was too afraid to save you a dance at the prom while you were with your boyfriend. You knew all the secret shames about me. It felt like you were a tiny bomb with the power to ruin everything I pretended to be. But I was okay with it. I remember finally accepting you as one of those shames, so I confirmed it by giving you a ring. It was a plastic one from the bakery I worked at. It was one of those faux engagement rings for cupcakes. It was cheesy, but I stole it for you. I wrote you a long note, like this one I'm writing now, about how I loved you, and how I didn't know how you liked the broken parts of me. I put it in an envelope from my dad's work and sealed the ring with it. It was the closing of our senior year musical. I gave the note and the ring to the sound girl before the show, and she delivered it backstage to you. After the show, we both were crying. You had the ring on. We didn't talk about it. 3 weeks later, we graduated high school. I was moving to New York in 3 months. I decided I would tell you once and for all before we both went our separate ways. On the way to school's post-graduation party, I played the talk over and over again in my head. I quietly prepped myself as you took me by the hand from party activity to activity. Finally, I took you down to the bathrooms to be alone. I nervously wanted to be out of earshot of the mom chaperones. I didn't want anyone but you to know. We were finally alone, and you were holding my hand. I looked at you and asked another girl for the first time in my life if she liked me too. Without missing a beat, you told me, "Of course. Why didn't you ask me before?" You told me you were only gay for me, and I was the only girl you would ever like. We left the bathroom, and you proclaimed to our friends that we were married. On the bus ride home, you cuddled up in my arms, and I kissed your forehead. A guy across from us glared at us the whole time. You didn't realize, and for the first time, I didn't care. When we were back in our small town, we got off in the morning light for breakfast. As we all sat down, you ran away. We never talked about what you told me ever again. I was angry with you for years after. I had a false hope that you would text me and tell me you were sorry. I imagined one Christmas in our hometown we'd see each other like a Hallmark movie, and we'd kiss and you'd tell me you missed me. I don't want that anymore. If you see this, Please don't tell me you miss me. I don't miss you anymore. There are things I wish I got to ask you. I wish I could have asked you how to properly get ready for dates. I wish I could have asked you why I felt like my brain was static. I could have asked you why I love talking on the phone with you so much. I could have asked you why I felt like I was in a fog all the time, or why I thought I deserved to be in pain. I could have asked you if you hated me for what I did. I should have told you I never wanted to eat again and shrivel up into nothing. I should have told you I felt like I was falling all the time. I should have told you I thought your God hated me. I wanted to tell you anything. I wish I didn't let you down. I wish I was wired the way you programmed me to be. But talking to you again, like we used to, means all the good things I've built go away. I go back to secret shames that have been tattooed on my face. I wish I could tell you any of this. I imagined you seeing this and being angry. I used to wish I could ask you if you loved me. I used to wish I could know the answer. I don't wish that anymore.